Welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast
with Garrett Williamson.
Health, wellness, exercise, nutrition, and a whole lot more. Got questions? Call us and leave a message at 251-278-EDGE or message us at Personal Edge Fitness on Facebook and Instagram, at Team PE on Twitter, or personaledgefitness.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. We're picking a rather somber topic today. I know that it's a topic that it's almost like the elephant in the room. When you're talking about health, fitness, and wellness, at some point in time, you need to bring up what has touched all of our lives, and that's cancer. I have a lot of connections with cancer and several clients that are affected by it, of course. Well, there's some sad stories, of course. There's some difficult times. There's also some stories of triumph, and some of them that are quite motivational. One such story has actually been compiled into a book about a runner who ran marathons with leukemia. I had the opportunity to sit down with Dr. Phillip Fields to discuss his book.
Thank you, Garrett, for having me here.
I appreciate you being able to join us. Now, I know you wanted to start out talking a little bit about the book or talking about a statement that you had to share with us.
Yeah, if there's one thing I'd like you to come away with from this presentation is that a diagnosis is not the end of life, it's only the beginning. And so that's what you should take away from this meeting.
Fantastic. Well, and that's made more than abundantly clear in your book. So, well, let me ask you this first. Now, I'm interested. We'll talk a little bit later about your education. I want to talk to you a little bit about that because I've got some questions and stuff that we talk about on the show that I'm going to dive into that if you don't mind.
Sure.
But also, when did you start running?
I can't remember when I wasn't running.
Really?
And I didn't run because I was any good at it. It was just that I liked the way it made me feel.
That's an interesting theme that kind of seems like it ran through your life, like the way it made you feel. I find that very interesting. So how many marathons had you done prior to, let's say, 2007?
My first marathon was in 1984. I was 37 years old, and I got hooked on doing that and had a goal to qualify for the Boston Marathon. I had a friend that told me that you're not a runner if you don't qualify and run the Boston Marathon.
Sure.
And so that was my goal. And so 11 years and 26 failed attempts, I finally qualified for the 100th running of the Boston Marathon in 1996 with a time of 3 hours and 25 minutes.
Fantastic. It's incredible. It's an incredible time to qualify for. How did that particular run go?
There's nothing like Boston. It's just the most incredible race, the crowds,
right,
the places you see and go through. It lives with you forever.
And that's what I hear from, I've done world championship races that happen to be my kind of Boston Fair Marathon, but I talk to people that are runners that do marathons, and that is that's the creme de la creme. That's the one. I've heard people that have run New York and said it's a tremendous experience, but nothing compares to Boston. So,
yeah.
And I got that from reading your book also, but they weren't always successful attempts. We'll get to that in just a minute because I think that was somewhat of a life-defining moment. Now, you didn't do this alone. You mentioned that a lot in the book. You talk about, in fact, you dedicated this to a lot of people that shaped your life, and one of the reasons why you wrote the book. So any particular people you want to talk about, especially in the early days?
Well, the group I called the team, and there's actually a chapter in the book about them, they took me to a whole new level of training.
Right.
That actually allowed me to get to a point where I could qualify.
Sure.
I thought I was training, but these guys took it to a whole new level.
Right.
And they were all excellent runners. They had all run marathons under 3 hours.
Had all of them done Boston?
2 of them had.
Okay. So a couple of them were, as you described, great runners, right?
Right.
Okay. By that definition. So, and you did a lot of your training out at, you were teaching in Mobile at the time. And it's for the marathons you were doing. These were some university friends of yours that worked in the university also? Or?
One worked at the university, and actually 2 of them did, and the other was a building contractor.
Okay, I got you.
And so we'd meet at noon every day and go out for a 10-mile run. Just
a 10-mile run every day?
Right.
Yeah, no big deal. So.
Yeah, these guys, they had no compassion for pain. They would run 10 miles. We'd do it Monday through Friday, and then they would get excited about doing a race on Saturday.
Right. Most people call that sick, but I understand that some people are driven to do such things. So
yeah, and every run was a race to these guys. They were always competing.
You talk about that. In fact, you talk about somebody that kind of changed the course a couple of times. In fact, you've got I think there was a video y'all did of a race or something that involved a truck and.
Yeah, we had this one guy. I won't mention his name. Which if you get the book, you'll read about him. But he would always be the first one to dress out, and he'd get out the door before we did.
Right.
And so it was his competitive edge. I mean, he wanted to win at all costs.
I understand.
And so he would always cut something off of the course. And it didn't matter what course we ran, he always found a way to make a shortcut out of it.
Right.
And so that was his nickname, Cut the Course, Larry.
I got you. Well, getting
funny guy.
Yeah, I'm sure. So it sounds like it, especially in his running style, or at least his running pattern. Let's put it that way. So, But I mentioned earlier how many times you'd actually run Boston marathons and what have you before 2007. The reason I bring that up is that was a rather significant time for you. Can you tell us a little about what happened?
Well, after the 96, I sort of took a hiatus from running marathons. I still trained, but I started doing triathlons.
Right, okay.
And then I told the group that I ran with, I said, we need to qualify and do in Boston at least one more time.
Right, okay.
And so we all trained together, and we qualified in 2003 for the 2004 Boston Marathon.
Right. Now, we're going to hold that story on what happened in the 2004. And if you would, I think skip to 2007, because that was a rather significant change in your life.
Yeah. So, actually, I did the first light marathon in 2006 under 4 hours. And so I was on my way back to Boston. And about 3 weeks after that marathon, I couldn't run 3 miles without stopping to walk.
Wow.
And so since that was so sudden, they thought it was cardiovascular.
Right.
And so I went through all kind of tests. And actually, I spent almost 8 months, almost 10 months actually going through tests.
Right.
And finally, my general practitioner took a blood sample.
Right.
Surprisingly, that was the first one in all those tests.
Exactly.
And my white count was exceedingly high.
Right.
So he said I had a number of possibilities, and it turned out it was leukemia.
And you started out here with as far as once you had the leukemia diagnosis, you started out here at Mitchell Cancer Center, but you also spent some time, I believe, at MD Anderson.
Right. I wanted a second opinion.
Sure.
And actually, what I was doing, I was just putting off the inevitable.
Sure.
Because I was pretty sure they got the diagnosis right here. But so I went to MD Anderson, and they looked at different cell markers than they did here, and came up with the diagnosis.
Right. Okay.
And there they told me that I had an aggressive form of the chronic lymphocytic leukemia, and that I would probably be starting chemotherapy within 3 months.
Wow.
And even with that, I probably had a 5 to 7 year life expectancy.
Most anybody would be, of course, be shocked receiving that news. I mean that's, I feel a little ridiculous asking you how'd you feel. What I really want to ask you about is, what was the first thing you asked the doctor?
Well, my only concern was, can I get back to running and training for Boston?
Wow.
So that's what I asked him.
Yeah. And his response?
He said I needed to find another hobby because that would more than likely shorten that 5 to 7 years.
Wow. How did that feel?
That was the worst news I received at MD Anderson.
Wow.
Even beyond the 5 to 7 years, because what I learned in this whole journey is that running was a real passion of mine.
Right. Even
though I didn't excel in it, I don't have any trophies on my walls or anything, but I just love doing it.
I can understand that, but you'd already. I mean, if you don't mind, I'm testing you on this, but you had already attained in your mind great runner status. I mean, because you'd run Boston,
yeah.
And
but after you run Boston, you want to do it again.
Okay.
It's just that incredible a race.
I understand.
And what makes it so unique is that it really drives you to train, because it's the one marathon you have to qualify for.
Wow. And you didn't drop your dream for running Boston, but you kind of took it to another level. Now, I talked in the first segment about the quest of feeling normal that I've seen with the experiences I've had with people being diagnosed with cancer. But you took normal and you threw it in bucket list territory. Tell everybody what you decided to do.
Yeah, well, one thing I quickly learned is that running was the one thing that made me feel normal.
Right.
And so I set a goal. I've always been goal-oriented, that I would run a marathon in every state, and starting in 2009, and I would finish those states in 2012. Now, the reason I picked 2012, because that was going to be 51 marathons in 47 months.
Oh, my gosh. Fantastic.
And so I picked 2012 into December of 2012 because based on the time when I started having symptoms, that was going to be 6 years into my 5 to 7. So I couldn't procrastinate.
Right. Time was definitely a factor there.
Yes.
So it's an incredible. I mean, most people would think about would think about, of course, 3 to 5 years, and definitely making the best of 3 to 5 years, but be more focused on the diagnosis, focused on this. And here you were setting a monster, a bucket list type of goal. Did you happen to share this with your physician?
Yes, he wasn't excited about it. My oncologist here at MCI is Dr. Thomas Butler.
Right.
And very laid back, very conservative in his approach, and he's always upbeat. Right. And he was concerned what running marathons might do to me. Sure. But unlike at MD Anderson, he didn't tell me not to do it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I mean, it sounds like he kind of understood you. I don't know that anybody would have been successful to tell you to stop.
They wouldn't have. I mean, my cardiologist has done it, and
right.
recently because of chemo-related issues with my heart. But
tell me about this journey now, because when I was reading about it, you had it was quite a bit of a challenge. In fact, the times you chose to do this and what was going on in your life, especially with the diagnosis and your treatment, was, I mean, that's far beyond carrying a 50-pound pack for 26.2 miles. It really is. So tell us a little bit about the journey and how this gets how you get going on it.
Well, the real challenge was to work in a marathon a month around my teaching schedule. Right. And sometimes if a national park was close by and I wanted to do hiking in there, I had to take some extra time also. Sure. There couldn't be a course going on when I ran these marathons.
So wait a second. Now, you're running a marathon in these areas and you're also doing some hiking too while you're out there?
After the marathon.
Okay.
No, not before.
That was a heck of a warm-up there, Phil. Yeah. Definitely so.
Yeah, the day before a marathon, I don't do anything but chill out in the room.
I understand. So where did it start?
And everything went well for until 2011 when the oncologist said it was time. Okay. And the way they knew that, they were monitoring my blood every month.
Sure. Well, excuse me for interrupting, but by that time, 2011, how many marathons did you have towards your goal of 50?
Well, it was one a month at that point, so there was 11 and 12. Actually, in 2010, I ran 16 marathons that year. Wow. So
amazing.
27.
27 at that? Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you. So in 2011, it was time.
Right. The way they knew that is that they looked for a doubling time of the white cells. Okay. Because the chemotherapy was going to affect cells, would act on them when they were unmasked and doubling. Right. Okay. And undergoing mitosis. Sure. And so my count started doubling each month. Or not each month, each week. Right. That I was given a blood sample, and so they said it was time.
I got you.
And even then, I questioned, did I really need to do it then? And so he sent me to have a second opinion just so I'd be comfortable with his decision and with mine.
Sure. And
so I went to another oncologist, and they said they agreed with him. And I said, well, do I have to do it right now? Right. And they said, no, if you have some things you need to get done, you can wait a few days. Sure. And I was thinking about waiting 2 years until I finished my goal. And her comment was, not if you want to live. Right. And so that was a shock.
I'm sure.
And so basically chemo started. It was 3 days a week. I picked Wednesday, Thursday, Friday because I could teach on Monday and Tuesday. Right. And hoping that I would recover over the weekend. Sure. And so on Wednesday, I handled it okay. Thursday and Friday, Saturday and Sunday, I couldn't eat anything. I couldn't drink anything.
Right. Wow.
And I'd go in Monday, and they'd give me a fluid IV. Right. And by that afternoon, I was back running.
Oh, my gosh.
And
this is after not being able to eat or drink anything.
Yeah. I'd go in Monday, and I'd be 15 pounds lighter than on the Wednesday before. And
then go knock out a run on Monday afternoon.
I would run Monday afternoon, and I would schedule a marathon 2 weekends out from that. And so I'd do the marathon that weekend, and then I'd come back and start that next Wednesday on the next treatment.
That's incredible. I tell you, after hearing that, I'm not so sure I'm going to take really, I'm not sure I've heard an excuse for one of my clients about not showing up for a one Monday workout. I mean, that's incredible. But 2 weeks out from that day, from that Saturday, that weekend or whatever, you would plan a marathon.
Yep.
How successful were you?
I never failed in one during that period.
Amazing. Well, how did it feel?
And I couldn't. I mean, you know, I had a goal.
Yeah, obviously. So that's what was driving you. Well, and this sounds like a strange question, I know, but I thought about this, and what would you say that what part did the goal of 50 marathons in, you know, I keep saying 50 marathons, it's a marathon in every state. Actually, it was 51, wasn't that correct?
I did D.C. as well.
D.C. as well, okay.
And I repeated Florida, so it was actually 52 and
52 is what you ended up, okay. Okay. What part did that play in your recovery?
Like I said, running was the one thing that made me feel normal.
Right.
And so, and the nice thing about training and running a marathon, for that time that you're out there doing that, you don't think about leukemia.
Oh, okay.
And
It takes your mind off.
It just took my mind off of it.
There's something I talk about a lot. The live age is one of my mantras, and the idea that you know, we cause ourselves to deteriorate, not just deteriorate over time. And one of the things I say that really drives a lot of that is mindset. I mean, mindset drives everything. You know, the old idea that if you think you can't, you won't. I mean, nobody really questions that. This speaks to exactly that. I mean, it was for lack of for the risk of possibly belittling it, it was a diversion.
Yeah,
more than anything.
Was. And plus, you know, when we're used to running marathons in the 3:30, 3:40 range, and now you're having to do these in 5.5 hours.
Right.
And during chemotherapy, somewhere in 6 hours.
Wow.
It is a mental thing, you know, and it's something you just have to get over. And that's the one thing about passions that I've learned from this, is that you can take your passion too far and not really enjoy the journey. Because when I was running in the 3:30s, I was not happy with those marathons because I was not qualifying for Boston with them.
Right.
And so I considered them just failures along the way.
Right.
When in fact, I look back on those, and those were just special marathons.
I'm sure, yeah.
Based on what I'm running now.
Well, and you mentioned that. In fact, I'd marked a section in the book where you're talking about that, and you talk about, excuse me, I think it's my water bottle wanting to talk, but you talked about looking back on my journey from 1984 to present has been so ironic. I never enjoyed the accomplishments of running marathons in the 3:30s because that time was not fast enough, as you said, to qualify for Boston. But you said now, in the end of this, now I would love to be able to break 6 hours for a marathon.
Yes.
Okay. This is the reason I brought up in that story a minute ago, and it reminded me of the story, and this is the reason I told it in the first segment about my clients searching for there. And it's amazing how many times I have people come in and sit in my office and talk about, God, I used to could. And all I can think when I hear them saying this is exactly what you just said. At that time, did you appreciate that? Or were you in a constant state of there? Now knowing this, two things. First thing, are you there? Are you living your level of wellness now? It's something we that Personal Edge calls your level of wellness.
Well, I'm living with it.
Okay.
So
yeah.
It's it's deteriorated pretty much, and
right.
But there's still something in the back of my mind that won't let me quit.
Right.
And you know, there's such a euphoric feeling finishing a marathon.
Sure.
But like I was thinking the other day, now my marathons have become a love-hate relationship.
Why's that?
I hate running because I feel so bad when I'm doing it.
Right.
But I love the feeling of completing a marathon at the end.
Wow.
And so that overcomes the
hate
negative
of the
feeling, and immediately looking for another one to schedule.
Sure. And this particular passage that you talk about these different times, and the fact that you at the time when you were running the 3:30s, you weren't really appreciating and enjoying them. There's plenty of people. There's probably people listening to this show right now, and there's plenty of people that hear this on the podcast, and they're there. They're mad at 3:33 because they're trying to hit 3:29. What kind of advice would you have for those individuals?
Enjoy the journey.
Right.
You know, if you work hard, you'll get there.
Right.
And you just can't give up.
Sure.
If you're not getting there, you've got to work harder.
Right.
But enjoy every one of them.
I can definitely understand that. That makes perfect sense, and I can't agree with you more on that. So let's go now. Now I'm going to skip over and talk a little bit about your education. The reason being is that I noticed in the book that your education certainly played a part in your journey after your diagnosis. I mean, you're a researcher, and in fact, I lost count. I mean, how many chapters you've written, and you and your brother, I believe, traveling around to different areas and doing.
Right. We both took different routes, but ended up doing research on the same hormone.
Oh, wow.
And so we collaborated on a lot of research projects.
Sure.
And we were internationally known and invited to give talks nationally and internationally, and
right.
which was a great journey. When you can do something with your brother who you truly love,
right.
it really makes it a special time in your life.
Now I can't disagree with you. I can't disagree with you at all about that. I have an older brother, and I call him my hero. And my first world championship, my brother and I qualified together, and we raced in 2011 in the sprint triathlon for the Team USA in China. And so I share that with you. But the point I want to bring up is at the heart of this. You're a researcher. I mean, you're a teacher and educator. You're a researcher. You did quite a bit of research on the particular type of leukemia that you have. And I read about that in the book. You actually do some explaining about that. For somebody that's going through a similar journey, that's been diagnosed with, as we call it, the big C, where do you recommend they learn more about it? Because I'm sure that people have a million questions.
Yeah. You've got to go to a reputable site.
Okay.
And the one that I would go to is called cancer.gov.
Sure.
And you just plug in what your diagnosis is, and you can get all the information you want.
Right.
If you just go to Google or Wikipedia, you get so much overwhelming information that you're just really not reputable or true.
Right. And when we come back now, we're about to go to a break in just a minute, but when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the fact that you've reached a point in your journey, but you're not stopping. You're using your experiences, not just through the book, but you're using your experiences to help others. And I want to talk about the different things that you're involved in as far as reaching out and helping others through this same journey. So I tell you what, if you think your workouts are tough, try doing a marathon while going through chemo. There's so many things in your book that help people. And I noticed something that you mentioned in here that some people might find strange, but you talked about thinking of dying, or the lack thereof that some people do. And in that conversation, in that paragraph, you mentioned you felt fortunate with your diagnosis. Can you explain that?
Well, I always had an interest in traveling around the U.S. and going to national parks and hiking in them.
Right.
But there's always a reason not to.
Sure.
You can always come up with an excuse.
Yes.
And since with the diagnosis, procrastination is no longer my vocabulary.
Right.
And so it afforded me the opportunity to do that.
Right.
Something I would not have done.
Wow.
So I've been to every state, every Canadian province.
Oh, wow.
Hiked in all the major national parks in Canada and the U.S. And that's just something I would not have done.
Well, and you mentioned that after you finished you did the 51, you went on and ran marathons in every province in Canada, and then also Civil War battlefields.
Yeah, growing up, I was a Civil War enthusiast. In fact,
Right.
as I've gone to the libraries and read every book I could get my hands on.
Sure.
And to go to parks like Antietam and Gettysburg, where
Right.
there's so much history.
Well, yeah, I'm sure.
So much bloodshed, but yet so much honor and courage on both sides.
Right.
And to actually go there and run a marathon through those battlefields was incredible.
I'm sure. And of course, and you spent time there afterwards and spending time going through the battlefields. Of all the marathons you've run, which I think I know the answer to at least one of them, but which one would you definitely go back and do again? And is there one that you not care to do again?
Of course, Boston. I mean, I'd go back there
of course.
again. Probably one of the most unusual marathons I did, and the one that really left more memories with me was a Kailua Volcano Marathon.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Over on the Big Island, Hawaii.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've spent a whole chapter writing about that.
Right, I found that fascinating.
Incredible story and sight.
Yeah.
The most beautiful site I ran one was Crater Lake.
Really?
And,
oh, wow.
Yet one of the hardest because
elevation,
I don't make sufficient red blood cells or hemoglobin, and the
Right.
elevation there was 7,500 feet.
Oh, wow, that's an extra challenge.
And so it was an incredible challenge.
And, you stated in the book that your doctor stated that runners are the worst patients, that they think they can, this is actually a quote from the book, they think they can outrun their illness. And I'm curious because, I finished this book, so I know kind of, where you are, at least at the time when you finished the book, where you were. When did you finally see the light on that, or did you?
Probably saw it when I was told that. But I really didn't notice it until probably the last 3 years when I started having heart issues.
Right.
And so my cardiologist was always trying to get me to stop running marathons because he said, you're going to drop dead out there.
Right, yeah.
And I said, well, if I drop dead doing what I love doing, then, I'm okay with that. And that's when he told me that.
Right,
so.
Right. Well, I can definitely understand that. I mean, to go doing what you love, that makes perfect sense to me. And the amazing thing about your journey is that you never stopped living. That was the whole idea. I know that may sound trivial, but you grabbed a major goal with gusto. And it seemed to drive you through this entire process. And in this book, it gets much more detailed. You talk about your family, and your mom was evidently a tremendous influence. She was quite a giver herself.
Right. She was the first public health nurse in Sumter County.
Right.
And she went through in there in a time when kids were dying from hookworms.
Wow. Yeah.
Infestations, and people didn't have sanitation.
Sure.
And there were no vaccinations at the time.
Wow. Yeah.
And so she basically built up a health program there in that county. And she's been, the legislature in Florida has proclaimed her as the, angel of mercy.
Oh, wow.
And they've named the highway that goes by the health clinic in her honor. So.
I tell you, the book, just the stories that he tells about his mother, and you can definitely see where he gets his tenacity from, and that's worth. I tell you what, that's worth more than the price of the book. That's for sure. Speaking of the book, where can you get it?
Best place, you just go to Amazon.com
Sure.
and search my name, Phillip
Right.
Fields.
All right.
2 L's in Phillip.
Okay.
And it'll pop up for you.
Fantastic. So we'll make sure we put that on our Facebook page so we can go that link also. But now that you've gone through this yourself, you're doing more just to give back. Tell us about what you're involved in.
Yeah, well, I was at a marathon in Wichita, and they had published an article about me, and I got a phone call from a lady that was inspired by what I was doing, and she was encouraged because her daughter had been diagnosed with leukemia and was going to undergo chemotherapy, but now she felt like there was hope. And so that's when I started raising money for pediatric oncology.
Oh, fantastic.
And since that was 2010, since then I've raised close to $100,000 for pediatric oncology.
That's tremendous.
And so that's one of the reasons I wrote this book, because it was a way to hopefully generate royalties for pediatric oncology.
Right. The girl that you're talking about, you talked about somebody in your book that had read your book or heard your story, actually saw your story in the
Right. The lady's name was Melanie. And,
right.
I never got her last name, so I was never able to truly thank her for putting me on the right path and
sure.
Thinking about others and not just my own self-serving goal that I had of running those marathons.
And don't you have a website that they can go to?
I do have a website. It's called runningwithleukemia.org, and the thing on that is it's .org, not .com.
Okay.
So runningwithleukemia.org
All right.
has photos from all my marathons, my running times,
Sure.
Stories.
Tremendous.
So,
And hopefully a link to get the book also somehow.
the book is linked in there that you
Great.
can, if you go to runningwithleukemia.org, you will
Right.
see the link for the book there as well.
Great. You still running?
Still running. Just got
Good.
back from the Lake Mead Marathon and
Oh, tremendous.
planning one for Connecticut and Wyoming now.
Oh, wow. Wow. I guess your goals, I mean, being goal-driven, your goals haven't stopped.
No, I'm sort of in the back of my mind. I'm thinking I'll complete the states a second time, and I've got seven
Why not?
seven more states to do.
Tremendous. Tremendous. Amazing. Amazing.
But I also belong to an organization called First Connection, which
Right.
is I joined that through the Leukemia Lymphoma Society.
Sure.
And what they do is they have your name and address and phone number, and they put you in connection with people that have the same type of cancer. And it's like, Alcoholic Anonymous.
Right.
you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
and
Having a
they-
sponsor, more or less.
So if somebody wants to call and talk, you listen. You don't talk.
Right.
You don't give them advice.
Right.
You just listen and offer them encouragement.
That's tremendous, and I appreciate the story. I appreciate what the fact that you've chronicled this, especially for anybody going through this and anybody really facing any kind of challenge. And I also appreciate you being on the show and telling us your story about it.
Sure.
I tell you, I don't know about you, but I was thoroughly motivated, thoroughly impressed with what Dr. Fields not only has suffered through, but how much he is going and giving back to those that are suffering the same affliction. I want to thank Dr. Fields for coming on my show and sharing that with us. And I want to tell you, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you tuning in and listening to the show. If you like us, please subscribe, tell your friends about us, and most importantly, remember to seek your level of wellness.
Thanks for listening to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast with Garrett Williamson. Subscribe now and be a part of the show by calling 251-278-EDGE or message us on Facebook and Instagram at Personal Edge Fitness or at Team PE on Twitter, and visit us at personaledgefitness.com.